I dated a woman early in recovery. She smoked crack with my sponsor.
How did that work out?
It didn't for any of us. None of the three parties involved. I'm assuming there's only three of us involved. None of it didn't work out for any of us. That's a 0% risk with my non-alcoholic wife. And when I say non-alcoholic, again, it's not just that I didn't meet her in AA. It's that she doesn't belong in AA. She's not like you. She's not like me. She can have a drink or two and nothing weird happens. It's no phenomenon of craving. She doesn't have a few drinks and think we need to get crack. It's not a thing.
She might think I would need to get a purse.
I mean, she doesn't do frivolous spending when she's had a drink. I mean, she's pretty stable.
Oh, that's awesome.
Welcome back to the Struggle and Strive podcast. My name is Estil Wallace. I am your host, and today we are doing something fun, something different. I've invited my dear friend, Mark North, to be here, and Mark is going to ask me anything. I think we're talking about relationships, but it's really up to Mark.
Well, I'll try to keep it on track, but we'll see where it leads.
On track, off track, we can go in the weeds. It doesn't really matter.
Awesome. All right, you want to dig in?
Yeah, let's go for it, dude.
All right, so I'm really grateful to be here and for the opportunity to kind of see in an open forum, openish forum, some of the answers that you might have or insight that you might have that I've been so privileged to kind of bend your ear about privately.
Sure.
So let's just start off with something light to get us in there.
Okay.
Is pornography unspiritual?
Wow, we went straight in. I mean, I'll give you a direct answer and then we can sort of undo the nuance.
Awesome.
So the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, pornography is unspiritual, it's unhealthy, it's bad for you, it's bad for the people who produce it, it's bad for the people who are involved in every aspect of its creation. That's the first answer. The challenge with just telling people that porn is bad is like telling kids that drugs are bad. It's not going to stop them from doing it. That's not enough. There's no substance to that answer that I just gave. To someone who has already gone through the context of life and has come to the conclusion themselves, oh, this isn't healthy for me and I don't want it. The way someone no longer wants heroin, right? Or something like that. It's attractive for the same reasons heroin is attractive. It's attractive for the same reason, donuts are attractive. It's very primitive to see a set of tits and be like, you can't look away. It's primal to our DNA. Everybody's most of us are breastfed, right? It's part of it's very primal to be interested in sex and sexuality. And for speaking to men particularly, we're hardwired, DNA infused, we're hardwired to procreate. So we're just, barring some fringy stuff on age or things that, hormonal issues, most dudes are horny AF, right? We're hardwired to go populate the earth. So right. If you're watching this and you're a young guy and you're looking at porn and you're trying to balance it all out, I want to start with the removal of shame. What the impulse that you're following is 1000% natural and God intended, right? You're not doing something that's against nature at all. So let's start there. There's no shame in the fact that you're horny AF. God designed you that way. Now, where it starts to get really unhealthy, masturbation as it leads into pornography, which is the question you really ask, because they go together.
Sure.
What is the utility? The utility of our hardwired natural sexual desires is for procreation. It's for families, to raise children. This is all beautiful. This is awesome. Sex with my wife is amazing. The children that we have produced as a result of that are amazing. Raising them together is amazing. Now, take that inner drive. We'll use me, but let's go back in time. Now, not 47-year-old me, happily married and with children. Look at 27-year-old me, newly sober, looking at pornography. I want what I have now, and I'm not sure if I can get it. I'm definitely not sure how. So I'm confusing, means goals with ends goals, which people do all the time in multiple dimensions of life. We do it a lot financially with our careers, right? Here's a real, let's go like recovery style. Means goal is I need $40, right? Because I need to get well.
Of course.
End's goal is I need to get my fucking life together, right? These are the approaches to these two goals are very different, right? One of them will take years. And so I cave to the $40. I need, if I get $40, I can black out and I can forget about my crappy life today. I know deep down that that's not a plan built for the long haul, but I allow myself to trade the $1 million solution for the $40 answer one more time, thinking that I'll have tomorrow to try again. But that's the mistake we fall into. And pornography is the same way.
Well, and I think that, for me, particularly, so full disclosure, you sponsor me in AA. You have become one of my closest friends and mentors. And so you're kind of familiar with some of the stuff. I personally needed to put a hard stop to pornography and to a lot of, I had issues sexually that I needed to work through and to come up with what my ideals were. And we did that actually as an assignment, right? And kind of to do a reset spiritually, and say, this is not okay. This is not one of those things. And so pornography had to go out the window for me. It was like, and I knew that. I felt it at my core, right? And I think that what you were kind of getting to earlier with that is like, whether it's the $40 fix or this and that, is on a spiritual end, is if I'm sitting here getting this fix off of pornography, am I really being intentional with what I'm trying to do for the long haul, right?
Totally not. Yeah. They generally, those two approaches to life, and it doesn't matter if it's sex, if it's relationships, if it's money, if it's diet and exercise, like you can go across multiple dimensions, and doing the cheap thing that I can get away with or I can afford today versus the thing that deep down my GPS is telling me I really want. Those two don't reconcile. Right. Generally. They generally don't. It's hard to make those, they're not the same approaches.
Speaking of approaches, so I'm going to kind of jump around, and we got to keep in mind that I am coming from a recovery background.
Sure.
I'd like to be more general, but I would like to ask questions that I know that I get asked all the time by guys that are new to recovery and trying to figure this thing out, especially with guys that have went out over dating or some form of dating,
sure.
Right? They have issues.
I've seen a lot of flavors of that.
Yeah, issues with women and whatnot. So when is it that you would say is an appropriate time to start dating in recovery? And part B, how do you feel about dating apps?
Ooh, interesting. Let's start with your first part of your question. When is it appropriate to start dating in recovery? Well, as soon as you see somebody you think is hot. That's what goes through most people's minds. No, that's really, really bad advice.
Shucks.
I would recommend that the time to entertain the notion of seeking partnership would be post first couple of rounds of steps. When I say couple of rounds, I mean getting through the steps yourself, creating ideals for your future sex life, your future relationships, then taking other men through the same work at least a few times. So that, there's an old 12-step joke, like you haven't completed step 12 until your sponsees are sponsoring. So if you're, like boxers, they don't punch the face, they punch to the back of the head. Like if we're taking the same type of intention, like I'm not through the steps until I have sponsees that are getting people through the steps. Thinking about relationships that way, like I'm not really ready to start deploying what I've written down. I'm not ready to start activating what I've written down for my future sex life until not only have I done the writing, I've also taken other men through the same type of work.
Right.
And they're like, now I'm in a position where I've done more than mull it over. I've done more than a quick glance at it. Now I'm ready to actually date with intention and use my ideals, like use my list for a reference.
What does that mean to date with intention?
I can tell you from my experience, I think there are maybe slightly different versions of this, but I can tell you my experience is when I did my sexual ideals the second time around, I did them when I was newly sober. Kind of a blur. I don't remember what I wrote, honestly. Then I had a pretty bad breakup at about 2 years sober, and I did it again, which was a great place to do it, being bitter, being lonely.
Get to work through some of that junk, yeah.
I knew a bunch of stuff I didn't want.
Right.
And then you start getting the creativity going, like what do I want? And coming up with a more sound list of ideals for what kind of a man I want to be and what kind of a woman I want to attract. And then what are the what are the short handfuls of things that are just not acceptable? That list was pretty good. Then to go out and date, I think my first date was I asked a gal to dinner, and we went to dinner, and on that one date, I quickly realized like this is not the right forum for me to get to know somebody.
Sure.
Not because you can't get to know somebody over dinner, but because it was in the evening, it was on a Friday or Saturday. There's this, and even if she wasn't expecting to sleep with me, she was expecting that I was expecting it. You know what I'm saying? There was an expectation of intention, even if that wasn't, which it wasn't my intention, which is a first. So I realized quickly coffee dates worked way better. Coffee, late afternoon. So this is it, and it was odd, honestly, asking women out because I didn't have dating apps then. I was dating, not that they didn't exist, if you fact check me on this, but they weren't ubiquitous like they are now. So we're talking 2007. I'd meet a pretty pretty young woman at the gym or something, and I'd say, "Hey, think you're really good looking. You want to grab a coffee or something sometimes?" And they're like, "Sure." And then they would give me their phone number.
All of them were like, "Sure."
No.
Okay, I just
no. Hey, you got to get used to dusting yourself off if you want to win.
Right. Sure.
It's a numbers game. But then when I would actually call them or text them and say, "Yeah, like let's meet at Starbucks," I could tell like you want to like meet for. You legit like want to meet for coffee.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Trip or cold brew. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I want to, and that was as odd as it might've felt for them. It felt safe for me. And when I mean safe, like, I don't want to say I didn't trust myself, but I really didn't trust myself all that much. And I was new to dating this way.
Right.
And my intention was not to sleep with every woman that I connected with at all.
But I think that goes back to the spirituality is like, in my experience, God knows my heart. And the fact that I'm trying to do this the right way, I'm trying to go to coffee, I am trying to do this to put these guards up, right? Because I need to protect myself and I need to protect that. Just the whole thing needs respect. And the fact that you're doing that, I think leads to the results.
Yeah.
Right?
Like there are people that won't buy cookies. Not because they don't like cookies, but because if they leave them in the house, they'll eat them all.
Right.
It's the same thing. You go to coffee date in the afternoon for the same reason.
Yep.
It's like, let's just play it a little safer. It's a little safer for me because I don't know that I can trust myself.
We talked about the sex ideals, which is it came for us after my fifth step. We wrote down kind of what I want to be, what I want, and definitely what is unacceptable, right?
Totally.
And I remember sitting there with you, and I was on this, they call it a pink cloud in AA or in recovery, where everything's just great and this and that, and I think I'm on fire doing the deal, as you like to hear,
as I like to poke fun at.
Yeah. And I remember saying to you, and I say it to my guys, or I say it when I get the opportunity to talk to somebody about their sex ideals. And because I said to you, she's got to be in recovery. And you looked at me and go, does she? Let's unpack that a little bit. Why, and I love that you did that with me. I love a lot of the stuff that we got to kind of unpack early on and still get to. But why, what are the pros and cons to dating or wanting to date a woman exclusively in recovery?
Well, I'll tell you the obvious negative consequences. There's a possibility / probability / likelihood she's going to drink or do drugs again. And
it's in our nature.
Correct. That in and of its, and not because recovery doesn't work. Recovery rates are 80 to 85% for people who do the work. Just like a gym has huge success rates for the people that use the gym for what it's. I mean, if you calculate all the people who join EOS Fitness in January of 25, and how many of those people who signed up at EOS Fitness nationwide in January of 25 are in measurably great shape by January of 26, the numbers are going to be abysmal.
Right.
It doesn't mean gyms don't work. Right. So my statement, my answer to your question isn't throwing stones at recovery like, oh, you date a drug addict, they're going to get loaded. Well, you date a drug addict or an alcoholic, they probably are going to get loaded, not because recovery doesn't work, but because a lot of people don't go through with the process.
Sure.
They don't commit themselves to this way of life. Now, that's the obvious. And I know that people who are new in recovery will often look at their potential new life partner with rose-colored glasses and think, oh, she's different. We're both working great programs
Right.
or whatever. But if you're being honest with yourself and you're looking at your history and you're looking at your track record, that's probably not true. You have an opportunity if you're newly sober to build a foundation, which is what you should be doing in your first 12 to 18 months. I'm not telling you not to date in your first 12 to 18 months. A lot of people will tell you that, and those people aren't wrong. I just don't like to give a lot of dating advice, like specific dating advice to people on specific situations. But your first 12 to 18 months in recovery should be built on that you're building the foundation that you're going to build your life on.
Sure.
That being said, dating in early recovery, not early recovery, but dating in recovery, I think should come from a place of, all right, I've done some of the core work. I'm not saying you got to wait 18 months. I'm not saying don't. You definitely don't want to do it in your first 60, 90 days.
Right.
If you want a clear, like more definitive answer. Like, I don't think you have to wait a year or wait 2 years. Some people suggest that. I think somewhere in the range of I've now got home group service commitment. I've taken other men through the steps. My sex ideals, what I want for myself and what I want to bring to a relationship is really clear, is probably the right starting point. From there, taking people out on afternoon coffee dates is a great place to start. And using those notes as a reference point, I would suggest looking at the notes before you go out with somebody and then referencing the notes when you come back.
Sure.
Like, how does this line up? Am I behaving sort of like the person that just wants to get laid? Or am I behaving sort of like the person I've written down who's looking for something more long range, something more stable?
And I think real quick, I just want to jump into this real quick though, is that the downside to when it's all put together, because assume that I am assuming all these things are right in good intention and actually fall out or pan out the way that I'm expecting. Now I have children with her, and now this and that relapse doesn't just take my girlfriend from me. It could potentially affect my kids. It could affect, because even if I plan on staying sober and plan on continuing to do this, it could have detrimental effects too.
Yes, that's one of a million things that can go wrong if the person that you have decided to build a new relationship with is a person who's in recovery. Now, I'll say this, that there are relationships that were couple met in detox, couple met in rehab, couple met in AA, and 15 years later, they're still married. They have great marriage. So I'm not that person that's like, oh, it never happens. It does.
My wife's in recovery.
It does happen. I could point to a couple other couples I know that have like double-digit sobriety, both of them. They're like, and especially if they used or drank together, they're usually like within like 2 or 3 months, their sobriety dates are really close. So there are couples out there. And if there's a couple out there and you're watching this, know that, hey, God bless your union. I'm not here to hate on that.
Not at all. I just like to throw it out there because I've gotten to hear both sides, and I just like to be able to throw it all out there. Like, this is what you could potentially be looking at.
You could also cross a busy street with a dog in one arm and a kid in another and not get hit. I'm just not saying it's a great idea. It's risky. The risks are big. So yeah, the obvious risks are this person could get loaded again. If they get loaded again, will they make it to recovery again? Will you end up pen pal to prison? If you're a woman, men are more likely to land in prison. Not that women don't go to prison, but is that a future you're comfortable with? This should all be in your ideals, right? That's why I suggest the work first before getting into it. And if you've done the work, you can start to gauge your risk appetite on different issues that are in your inventory. If you haven't considered them, that's why we do inventory. Like, consider these things. If you're starting from scratch when it comes to relationships, or close to scratch as possible, then get clear about what it is you want to bring to the relationship and what it is you're looking for in a relationship. And if a very real threat / risk of imprisonment, absent fucking mom to your future children that aren't born yet, and in and out of rehabs and in and out of empty promises and throwing things at you and the cops coming, if those, like, you can decide for yourself before any of that happens or possibly doesn't happen. Like I dated and eventually married a woman who's a non-alcoholic, not like she wasn't in AA, like she doesn't belong in AA. She doesn't belong in a 12-step program. She doesn't need to go to treatment. She's a healthy person. But that being said, like the things that we just talked about, the possible, pitfalls and quicksand and traps of active addiction don't exist with my wife. There's 0%. I dated a woman early in recovery. She smoked crack with my sponsor.
How did that work out?
It didn't for any of us. None of the three parties involved. I'm assuming there's only three of us involved. None of it didn't work out for any of us. That's a 0% risk with my non-alcoholic wife. And when I say non-alcoholic, again, it's not just that I didn't meet her in AA. It's that she doesn't belong in AA. She's not like you. She's not like me. She can have a drink or two and nothing weird happens. There's no phenomenon of craving. She's not getting weird. She doesn't have a few drinks and think we need to get crack. It's not a thing.
She might think I would need to get a purse, but yeah.
I mean, she doesn't do frivolous spending when she's had a drink. I mean, she's pretty stable.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that kind of leads right into the next thing. So marriage takes a lot of work, right? Like any other relationship. What are some of the things that you and your wife do to stay on the same page and continue to row in the same direction?
This is very specific. We actually use the OKR system.
Okay.
What's
the OKR system?
It's objectives and key results. There's a book called Measure What Matters. In one of the episodes, I actually did an episode or two on goal setting where we talk about Measure What Matters and the OKR system. The OKR system is as simple as possible, is come up with an objective. I want to lose 20 pounds. And then come up with the key results, the KRs. What are the key results that instantiate that goal? What are the I want to lose 20 pounds in 3 months. That's the objective. Okay, that means starting today, I am going to count my macro nutrition. Right? I'm going to use my FitnessPal, and I'm going to consume a little bit more protein, a little bit less carbohydrates, a little bit more fat, like healthy fat, like avocado and stuff. And I'm going to take the gym membership that I have not been using, and I'm going to go 5 times a week.
Right.
Those are key results that can help instantiate that objective. So the OKR system is generally talked about in business, and it's an awesome, very simple framework for getting teams onto the same page. My wife and I adopted a version of that in our relationship many years ago. Now, we've been together for 17 years. I want to say we've been doing OKRs together for at least 6.
So you do them together. It's not individual goals. It's
no.
Okay.
So we talk about her goals, my goals. We have the conversation about what we want together and or individually. We do it a year at a time. Mm-hmm. So over the coming year, what do we want to see happen for? And we look at multiple dimensions. We look at romance. We look at our children. We look at our overarching business, which is how our careers generate revenue for our family. We also look at fitness. We look at friendships. Mm. And so each of these categories, we come up with what do we want to see in the next year? What do we want to grow? How do we want to grow? What is the fruit we are looking for out of these areas over the next year? And then we come up with some KRs on how to get to those objectives. And I want to be clear that it sounds nerdy and rigid that my wife and I use a goal setting system with our relationship, but it's really not rigid at all. We don't. It's not a stick to hit ourselves or each other with.
Sure.
They're guardrails. It's reminders. It's the opposite is years go by and you go, fuck, we were going to do that thing.
Yep.
Shit, when are the kids ever going to learn Spanish? We were going to take them to try skiing this year. It's been 3 years since we said that.
Right. It just doesn't slip through the cracks.
Right. It allows us to keep front of mind the things that we want to do. And it has nothing to do with what anybody else thinks. It has nothing to do with validation. It has nothing to do with society or anybody else. It's what are the things that we want? Let's put them on paper and let's work towards them.
Right.
Even if we fail, at least it's measurable failure. And there's some measurable success. If we didn't hit it at 100%, maybe we hit it at 60%. Maybe we really fucked off. 60% of our goal, at least we got somewhere.
Right. I know that you're very active in recovery, in your recovery, and other men's, and in all sorts of areas. I'm going to ask about the balance end of that. when you were just giving your last answer, it made me think about it, and I've struggled with it myself, is with my wife, does she feel like ever that I have this special thing because I have this big group of guys that I get to go and live this whole recovery process with. And how do and I think when you were talking about the OKRs and working as goals, it's like, no, what's important to us as a couple, right? And to really pour into our relationship and make sure that that doesn't get missed, because I can be a rock star AA guy and I can screw my house life all up.
Absolutely. I see men do it all the time. Without quite getting to your answer, I've seen over the last couple decades a lot of men, and I don't mean this in a defaming way, just as an observation, something to watch for, something that a peril that I've seen other men fall into is they throw themselves headlong into recovery, which is great, and then get locked into that momentum and never really circle back to be the present dad, to be the present supportive husband, to follow the career, to go out and do all those other dimensions of a grown man's life.
Right.
And no judgment on anybody who's doing that. You have to ask yourself. Each person has to ask themselves. Each man has to ask himself, am I being the best version of me that I can for God, for my wife, for my children, for my community, for the people whose lives God has entrusted me with their care at some level, and everybody's in everybody's care.
So it's just important not to forget that God also certainly gave you your family, right?
100%. And so if we're all here to feed each other, if it's our responsibility to welcome and feed and visit the people in the street as much as it is the people in treatment, the people in 12-step, the people in our church, if you go to church, it's just as important that I spend that time with my children.
Right.
It's just important that I spend that time with my wife.
So your kids are fortunate to have never seen you loaded. To a guy, like his kids, I don't know, 2 to 6, right? When do you think, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but when do you think would be a good time to kind of, and do you unpack what your addictions actually look like? And is that something you should do? You get where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do believe it's important for children to understand. The question isn't don't I, share with my children the dangers and the journey of, dad's addiction and recovery, his wounds and his healing. It's more about the appropriate, it's like, getting into hot water. So you do it slowly. Like, how and when do I tell them how much? I mean, our oldest, who's 9 now, when she was as young as 4 and 5, she was, we homeschool now. We didn't used to. She was in school. And at 5 years old, she had a friend whose parent was struggling. And her friend was telling her, my daddy isn't home because he's an alcoholic.
Wow.
And he's not, mom doesn't let him home. And my daughter's telling me this. And my wife and I kind of look at each other like, okay, I think we're having a conversation about this now.
It's heavy.
And we asked my daughter, have you heard that term before, alcoholic? And they're like, yeah, dad's an alcoholic. I said, how do you know that? Well, you go to meetings sometimes. Okay. Are there any other alcoholics in your life? And we start going down the list of people that my children know, friends, relatives that are in recovery. A couple of them are not in recovery. And by just examining, like, this person's behavior is a bit unpredictable, right?
Mm-hmm.
They only show up for birthdays and weren't there for Christmas that one time. Oh yeah. Well, that person is still struggling with alcoholism. That person, they have a hard time being stable. Whereas the people that say they're alcoholic but are super stable, they're in recovery.
Right.
They've healed from their wounds, or some of them are still healing. But that, when do I tell them about, smoking meth in, aqueducts behind 40th Street and Camelback?
We'll figure that one out.
Living on the streets and all
we'll
that
cross
stuff.
that bridge when we get under it.
I think by the time they're teenagers, I think it would be an honor and a privilege to have them sit in on maybe a big speaker meeting. if I'm honored to do that again, that would be inappropriate. 15, 16, probably old enough. At some point in the teenage years, I would like for all three of my children to be aware of exactly what I talk about when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, when it comes to 12-step, when it comes to methamphetamine, heroin, crack, Percocet, alcohol, homelessness, prostitution, fucking despair. Because that's what you don't get when you're a teenager. When you're a teenager, you get, I'm gonna go phone my friends on Friday night.
Right.
And what that might be video games and movies and etc. when you're, a younger kid and you're still hanging out with the same people. And by the time you're 13, 14, 15, 16, that starts to turn into getting beers from somebody's older brother and sneaking weed and pills. And eventually it can really get away from you. I mean, it's how it happened to me. Nobody handed me heroin when I was fucking 8. Nobody was like, here's a needle, stick this in your arm, kid. I would have been scared. It didn't come that way, right? My friend when I was 8 handed me a beer. He's like, this tastes terrible. I got it from my dad. I'm like, yeah, I want to try it too. And it was seemingly benign.
My oldest, I mean, this will be real time here. My oldest, I could visibly see that he's been smoking weed. I could tell. And then my wife, she's a little bit snoopier than I am, found some carts and some of that stuff. And I really had to pray on it. And I'm shocked I didn't even talk to you about this yet, so forgive me. But is he going to, both his parents, I know a couple things to be true. Both his parents are drug addicts, right? And have recovered. But do I associate his smoking weed with him going down the same path? And kind of that was a very gentle thing to walk around, right? Especially with how legal and just out there it is now for people. And he's 17 years old.
Well, this is a big question, and I think it's an important question. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't like to talk politics, but I'll share a political view here. I believe here in Arizona, where we live, and I voted for the recreational legalization, not legalization, I should restate that, the recreational decriminalization of marijuana. And I'll tell you why. I believe in the decriminalization of teenagers. And when I was a teenager in the 90s, marijuana was a felony in Arizona. A thumbnail worth could land you in jail with a felony. If you got it again, 2-3 of those, you could end up wearing orange.
Yep.
Over dirt weed that barely even worked. Here's another, as such, the only place to get weed in the 90s was from a dispensary? No, from a drug dealer. Because it was so criminal, you could only get it from criminals. Now, as a 14, makes me want to cry, dude. 14, 15, 16-year-old children in the 90s in this city. I'm not talking anecdotally, I'm talking about people I grew up with, myself, my friends, my fucking neighbors. We, as young children, were buying narcotics from the only people that sold them, who were criminals and had other narcotics and carried guns.
They weren't only weed dealers.
Yeah, there wasn't a dispensary in town. I didn't have an older brother with a weed card, you know what I mean, who could get me a wax pen. So that's the first thing I would say about the weed thing and teenagers. I believe in the decriminalization for that primary purpose. I
voted for it as well, just full transparency.
There's I couldn't agree more. I think marijuana being a felony is a gateway crime, because you break that law, and the people around you, if caregivers and teachers and people have told you that this is bad, and then you smoke weed at 15, and you're like, what? Wrong again, grown-ups.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're feeling now justified in breaking the law to do black market transactions with arguably bad people, shady people who deal in other types of narcotics and guns, who are now in 2025. This underbelly is completely interwoven with the drug cartels from South America. We're talking about people who traffic children for fucking rape. You're talking about access to an entire underbelly of humanity that I wish didn't exist.
Right.
And we want to condemn our teenagers to buy weed from them? Like, I can't get behind that. All right, so there's my stance politically on like, yeah, I don't think weed is the same as meth. I
Sure.
don't. I don't smoke weed. I'm abstinence. I'm sober. I've been a sober, not California sober. I'm like super duper. I don't take anything.
Now you're on the weekends?
Not even when I'm out of the
Okay.
country. I don't take anything. I don't take anything mind altering. And that's not some kind of a badge of honor. It's, believe me, like the things that it costs. It's like your kid being like my kids getting frustrated or jealous that I have 2 birthdays. I'm like, you don't want one. It's not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze, kid.
Right.
All right. What do you do with a 17-year-old who is smoking marijuana? I don't agree. Now that we put the legal thing aside, I don't agree that it's a great idea. Marijuana today in 2025 is so much stronger than it was in 1995. I mean, they've had 30 years to work on this stuff. They've been working on it like it's the cure for cancer. I mean, it is so strong.
Right.
Everything I'm saying now still doesn't change the fact that I don't want your kid, my friends' kids, going to prison for the stuff. I do not. Regardless of everything else, I don't want them going to jail. I don't want them having a criminal record because of it. But do I think it's healthy? No, of course not.
But me not projecting my situation onto him is that I honestly did not believe he was like super abusing. Like it has not yet, but my fear is, right? And so how do I walk that line?
That's really tricky. It's something you'll have to keep an eye on. Just because a teenager smokes pot doesn't mean they're going to shoot heroin or they're going to smoke fentanyl.
Literally
Or
his
they're gonna-
exact words when I
Those
finally
were
did.
his words?
His
You're a
exact
smart
words
kid.
is, "You think
Good.
I'm going to shoot heroin?"
Now let's
No.
let me tell you something that's like more middle of the road and more practical. Like at some level, like, yeah, teenagers are going to do what teenagers are going to do. At the other level, like what's the age requirement for marijuana in Arizona?
I
Anybody
think
know?
it's 21.
21? At some point, like, hey, bro, you're not supposed to do this till you're 21.
Right.
You know what here's what I tell my kids, and we don't talk about substances because they're still so little. But my kids obviously want to do things that we don't allow them to do
Sure.
regularly. And my response to them, and they'll parrot it back to you if you ask them. You're allowed to do what you want when what happens? When we're 18 and we support ourselves financially. Bingo. That's my job. I'm your parent. I'm supposed to protect you, love you, and nurture and help you grow so that you can be a self-supporting, contributing member of society.
Right.
And when that has occurred, and the only thing I'm good for is us sharing time together as, father and daughter, you make your own choices about whether you smoke pot or have a drink. And if my 20-something, one of my children in their 20s falls down the same traps that we've fallen down into addiction, I will absolutely be there as best I can to try to steer them into recovery.
Right.
Because I don't want them to do all of the things that I had. I walked around with that rock in my shoe many years longer than I had to. And I'm not here to blame anybody for not pointing me in the right direction. I wasn't ready till I was ready. But if I can shave some of those years off, I hope that none of my kids ever end up in addiction. I pray that they don't. One of my largest fears, actually. But if they ever do, I hope that I can shave years off of, what it took me to wander into recovery.
Absolutely. So switching into a more positive thing here, as our lives get more full, right? Kids, careers, sponsees. When is or how is it acceptable to start stepping back and not stepping back, but when you start to take an assessment of what is a priority in order to stay sober on your recovery journey, and to allow some of those other things, like the full life that God wants for me, right? That we talk about often.
It's a great question. The message that is given so often, and I am part of that, choir that preaches this to new people entering into abstinence, into long-term recovery, is to do a lot. You got to throw yourself headlong into this. The truth is, if you throw yourself headlong into it, which most people don't, the ones who do have long-term, incredible, outstanding outcomes. So if you are one of the people who's lucky enough to have enough willingness, honesty, and discipline to do that, and your life starts taking off, it's important to start not to navigate away from, but to do an assessment. And I think it's probably appropriate around a year and a half to 2 years in to really take an assessment of what do I want to be when I'm a grown up. Doesn't
Right.
matter if you're 50 or if you're 19 getting sober. You're looking at your new life. I can look back to the address of 4210 North Longview, and I can tell you, there's a latitude and longitude of the short season of my life where my life completely pivoted from my old life to my new life, and they're 1,000%. They're completely different, right? So it takes between a year and 2 years to build the foundation for long-term recovery. It just takes that long to get the neural pathways burned deep enough where prayer, helping others, honesty, making restitution for all the harm, all that stuff becomes the hard, big, heavy lifting is done, and the work that we do to continue on is sort of, operationalized. Like, yeah, I go to a few meetings, I do this, that. So how do I calculate like what's too much versus what's too little?
I know it's case by case, but
It is, but I think there are some points that we could highlight. One is, do I have an understanding of where what actions keep me in the spiritual connection with God? I'm talking daily prayer, meditation, service to others. So am I doing those things? Because when the 12-step program, when Alcoholics Anonymous, the original 12-step program was formed in the 30s, first of all, they didn't call it that. And the early people that they would mail the book to didn't have meetings. There was no such thing. The very, very earliest group they would infringe on Oxford group meetings. But I'm talking about once they wrote the book in 1939, and they had the first central office, they would mail it to people would write in and say, how do I learn about this? They would mail them a book to fucking Nova Scotia and be like, read this and try the stuff that's in it, right? You're not go get a sponsor and get a home group.
Right.
There's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than trying to assimilate with 12-step culture, nothing wrong with that if that's what you're going to do. But there's a difference between assimilating to your closest, nearest AA group or CA group or 12-step group and actually learning to take what's in the program and apply it to your life. They're not the same thing. There's a big difference between taking the steps, taking them into your life, making them a part of, operationalizing the spiritual concepts nested within those 12 steps. There's a big difference between that and hanging out with your buddies, hitting the vape and drinking a Monster at the fucking at the meeting hall.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. Not bad. Fellowship is fine, but that isn't the program. The program is outlined in the first 103 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's regardless of whether you're a gambler, an overeater, a drug addict, an alcoholic, or someone who's just curious about this and is interested in the street level spirituality of this thing that's worked for so many millions of people. You can start to live, air quote, normal life somewhere in that 1 to 2 year range. And I don't want to say take your foot off the gas because it's sort of always there. But if you've sort of operationalized, these are the components that I do that really help give me the juice of life. And I got to tell you, I have a couple of meetings I go to a week. I love them. I've always sponsoring a couple of guys and I love it. I love that God has entrusted me to stand in the gap between the street and his kingdom for new men.
Let's go.
Just like men did for me.
Yep.
I hope that I am never too successful, too happy, or too comfortable in my life to do that. I'm 20 years in. I feel great doing it. I had a couple of newcomers with me last night. Took him to get burgers and milkshakes in a meeting, and it was great. And we talked about God. And one of them, there's two of us. There's three of us at the table. One of them has been around for a while. He's new, but he's been around for a while. And the other guy's like, oddly been around for a while, but never worked the steps. And the other new guy's like, he's like 12-stepping this guy with me, right? We're talking about God and we're talking about his purpose on the planet.
Right.
And he gets up to go have a cigarette. And dude looks at me and he's like, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, if you and I aren't talking to that dude about God, who's going to? Look around. Who's going to do it?
All right.
Not the people where we picked him up. Not the people in this restaurant.
Right.
Luckily, we're going to bring him to a place where everybody's talking about God.
Right.
And And
Somebody's got to meet him where he's at, though.
somebody's got to meet that dude where he's at. So for me, and this is just me, I've been sober 20 years. I go to 2 meetings a week. I do have a service commitment. I do have a home group. I regularly sponsor people. I pray and meditate almost constantly, very consistently. For me, that's enough. I don't have to be the best speaker at an AA meeting or at a convention. I don't have to run a retreat. I don't have to be at 9 meetings a week. When I was newly sober, I went to 9 meetings a week. I was always at meetings, and I sponsored 8, 9, 10 guys at a time,
Right.
all the time. And to me, that was what I was told. I needed to do all this work, and so I'm a doer. I'm a typical dude. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. Give me a YouTube video, and I'm gonna reverse engineer this shit, and I'm gonna do it. I like to do things, and that was what I did. I took the 12-step stuff and I ran with it. And at a couple of years sober, yeah, I was miserable. It was a couple of Al-Anon guys. I'd just gotten out of a toxic relationship, right? With a gal that smoked crack with my sponsor. I leave her, and now I felt good about that. I left her, I joined a gym, I started my first business. I was doing a lot of things to take the self-parenting to a better level, really care for myself as if it were my job. Nobody else's, right? And I think I was just coming to that conclusion, that it was nobody else's job. Nobody was coming to wake me up early. Nobody was coming to get me to chase that dream. So I started taking care of myself. And now that I've left her and I've blocked her, I'm now crying because I'm miserably lonely.
Sure.
And my part of my plan for my future was to find a wife, get married, and explore marriage and parenthood and all this stuff. And that's now, at least for the interim, definitely postponed. Not happening. No, I'm not even getting laid now. So in that space, yeah, it was almost like a new bottom. I was miserable. And I went to
2 years.
At 2 years. I went to an Al-Anon meeting, and I identified as an alcoholic in that meeting. And 3, 4 guys sort of surrounded me after the meeting. And they were like, "What's up, new guy? I heard you identify as an alcoholic." And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "We are too. We don't usually say it anymore in that fellowship."
Sure.
We've been, and these guys were double-digit sobriety and a long time in the Al-Anon fellowship. And they were asking me, how long you've been broken up, what's going on with you, this, that, and the one dude's just eyeing me. He's listening to me talk, and he's not buying, something he doesn't like. And he goes, "Hey kid," I was 26. I was still fairly young when I got sober. He goes, "Hey kid, are you hiding out in AA?" I'm like, "No." What does that mean? He goes, "How many meetings do you go to a week?" I don't know, 9. I go to a meeting every day, and extra one on Saturday, extra one on Sunday. He goes, "How many service commitments do you have?" 3. He goes, "This is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask anyway. How many men are you actively taking through the steps right now?" And I'm like, "I don't know, 10. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "Dude, we appreciate all the hard work. We really do. We, the Fellowship of Recovery,
Right.
we appreciate all the hard work. And with all due respect, you're the type of guy at 10 or 15 years sober, you're going to stick a gun in your mouth. You'll probably never drink again, but you'll probably kill yourself the way you're living." He cut right into the center.
That hits, huh?
Yeah, I was bawling at the meeting. 2 years sober. He said, "We appreciate all the hard work, and you should do some of that. You should go to meetings, and you should sponsor people. You take 2 guys through the steps at a time. That's a great way to be of service to help your fellow man. Having a service commitment's awesome. If you ever want to have a productive relationship that turns into a marriage, I don't think you can live in AA and sometimes visit a girlfriend, potentially a wife. You're gonna have to find a way to care for yourself in a way that's got more space in it." And it was hard for me to hear that. I got sober in a very militant, group, and they're great. They're awesome. And I still push my brand new guys to do a lot, because chances are they're only going to do half of what you ask them to do. If they do half of the stuff I'm asking them to do, they're going to end up where I was after 2 years of sobriety, after the self-care.
Right.
But generally speaking, when guys do make it a couple of years, that's when this question comes up. It's like, dude, Do you need to go to 9 meetings a week? No. No. Are you thinking about using all the time? Has the obsession been removed? If you've done the first year to 2 years worth of work and the obsession to drink and use and to harm yourself and your fucking hatred and your venom and despite of people and yourself, if all that's gone, if your wounds are mostly healed, no, you don't need to go to 9 meetings a week. You don't need to sponsor 10 guys at a time. You can. I'm not here to stop you. But if you're asking, I'll give you the answer. I think it's healthier to go to some meetings and find ways to be of service so that you're continuing to stay in that reciprocal flow of energy between us and our fellow man and God.
Well, I think that, and that's what it is. It's
Make
like
room for a life too.
you had said earlier, like, I'm praying regularly. I'm working that muscle. I have a connection with a higher power. I know that. And at this point, I'm starting to see his breadcrumbs regularly in my life. Like I know what's pleasing. You like to use the analogy. It's like riding waves, right? And eventually you be able to kind of surf on them after a little while with a little bit of practice. And so not saying that we just get off the waves, but just knowing how to catch the waves, the spiritual waves, and knowing how to please God and to keep my relationship with my higher power, as long as I can maintain that. But part of that, it's paradoxical because part of that is working with other dudes. So it's just kind of, I guess there's no one shoe fits all or one size fits all.
Right. It's very dynamic for each person's case. I can look at my life and say, when I got married, I made room in my life, in my spiritual practice. If my body and my life truly is a temple, if this is what God has designed for everything, which I believe, then I can make time in my life to develop a relationship with this woman.
Do you and your wife still date?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have weekly date nights.
It's awesome.
We have date nights weekly.
Okay, was that babysitter? The whole deal is just you and your wife?
Yeah, it started, and a new thing this year, not that we've never done it, but it's in our OKRs, it's in our goals. We're taking 2 trips this year, just she and I, 2 or 3 nights.
That's fantastic.
Just she and I. We've already taken one.
Yeah.
The next one's going to be, and she didn't know where we were going. I planned it without, she knew that we were going and she knew the dates obviously. But didn't know where we were going until the day we went.
How fun.
Yeah, and it'll be the same
right?
thing. She's got a trip planned that I don't know about.
Oh, that's so cool. Right.
Yeah, continuing to date is really important. It's an easy thing to let go by the wayside with work, careers and children and life being busy. You guys are running a business. That life can get hectic, and it's easy. Just like, if you're like, for those people that are listening that are like in, that are entrepreneurs that are in startup land, in startup culture, it's easy to not take vacations, right? The workaholics among us.
It's going to crash if I'm not there, right?
Yeah. So it's easy to let a couple of years go by and go, fuck, I haven't taken a week off, like, and gone to a beach. And gosh, don't let that happen to your marriage. You don't want to let 2 years go by and realize you haven't spent the night alone with your wife.
Well, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of a different group as well of men that I respect and mostly entrepreneurs and mentors. And, I had brought up, because I know that I need to pour into my marriage, right? Yeah. That's one of the gifts of being around a bunch of guys. I sought out an early recovery guys with wedding rings on their fingers because I wanted one on mine at the right time. And I surround myself to this day with men that I cherish their relationship and the way that they treat their wives, you included, obviously.
Oh, thanks.
And
I was just thinking how happy I am for you. You're married. You have a growing family.
Yep.
You got a growing business. Your
Super
wife's
blessed.
awesome.
Yeah. It's
you're crushing it. For the camera, for the listeners that don't know Mark, when I met Mark, he has just stopped smoking meth and was still wearing an ankle monitor that detected alcohol in his sweat.
Yeah.
He was in big trouble, thin ice. And we even did a podcast. We interviewed a guy,
Timmy Cavanaugh,
the dank recovery guy, via Zoom. And you were like 30 days sober?
I definitely saw the ankle monitor on. Don't pan down. Yeah, absolutely.
So your life has grown tremendously in what's it been, 3.5 years?
3.5 years. Yeah,
tremendously. I was just thinking how happy I am for you.
Thanks for that.
You're showing with the wedding rings. I'm like, you're one of those guys.
Yeah, I am. It's that old adage of show me the 5 people you surround yourself with and I'll show you your future, right? And so that's what I did. But you guys, just recently I said, hey, I really need to pour into my wife more. And you guys had made the suggestion that when you get home, just put your phone down for 30 minutes. something as simple as that. But as
Connect with
intentional as
her.
I am with my recovery, I need to be with my marriage, right? It's God's greatest gift he ever gave me was my wife, and then my children as a result of. But I can't let any one of these things, which is kind of what gets a little bit challenging, right?
Yeah. There's so much balance. Well, let's stick with the wife thing for a second, because that's an important thing. Uh, if any of you know my wife, you could ask her. She'll tell you I am not great at this, at what Mark is describing, and I'm working on it. I'm putting real effort into not always having my phone, not letting months and months go by where we don't go out, just the two of us, all that sort of thing. But it takes, and that's not work in, people, because I hear people say both ways, oh, marriage is work, or people say like, well, if marriage is work, then it's not a good marriage. I've heard all kinds of different things. So it's not that it's not work, but it's not work like a chore,
Right.
but it does take intention.
I think it's more like an investment.
Yes, it's
You
more
know.
like an investment. It's more like an intention. It's like I want to have a better, deeper relationship with my wife. And so we carve out time together, whether it's without technology, whether it's without the distraction of children, whether it's without the distraction of work. And because there's different levels to that. Just putting the phone down when you get home is an easy one. Doesn't take babysitters, doesn't take nannies, doesn't take planning, doesn't take hotels. You want a date night, no kids. Assuming you have kids, then you've got to figure out kid coverage. You want to go to the next level and take a trip together. Now you got to figure out extended kid coverage. You've got to make sure it's time away from work, all those things. But none of them are impossible, and all of them are so valuable. All of them. All of them.
So praying is an important part of a recovering addict's life. How important is spiritual continuity? Like getting my wife and my kids on board with being spiritual at first. And I know the book talks about it a little bit, but what do you suggest with that?
Yeah, the book makes only mild mention of like bringing our wives and our families into morning routines and things like that. I think it's up to each family, getting down to like the recovering addict. I think the answer is yes, but then the nuance of how and when and at what levels, I think it comes down to the appropriateness of the family dynamics, et cetera. For me, it's very, very simple. Whereas, you've already noted I've been sober longer than my kids have been around, and then I've known my wife. So for us, as my wife's got her own spiritual journey, and we have ours together as a family, prayer before meals and at night and things like that is very natural, very appropriate. If a guy, let's say, is getting sober and he's rejoining his wife and children after being gone for maybe years and is rejoining the family system, I think there should be an open discussion about prayer. I think there should be an open discussion about the spirituality. And if you haven't been home in 2.5 years and you just got home and you got teenage boys and they're like, you may want to work your way into it. And I don't know exactly what that looks like.
Start coming in splashing with holy water.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to put people off, especially if you've burned your credit with your family.
Oh yeah.
To be like Mr. Spiritual all of a sudden. You should be spiritual. You should seek spirituality. But how and when we bring them into that fold, I think is unique to each case.
Sure.
Again, you've got your daughter's very young.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a no-brainer. It can be incorporated into her life from the beginning. Just like my children, it's incorporated into their lives very, very young. But yeah, to a guy who's just getting sober, who's re-entering the family dynamics, he may want to pray about, something to pray about right there. Give some real thought to how and when to bring them into prayer, whether it's evenings, whether it's before meals. Everybody's practices are a little different, and not everybody follows exactly the same model, so to speak.
Right.
We didn't do the Christian thing for a long, long time, yet prayer was still part of our lives. You know what I mean? So it's changed and evolved in the last couple of years, which is most of my son's life. So he doesn't know any different. Whereas our oldest, who's 9, she's known spirituality and prayer to be part of our lives as a family her whole life, and has only been more exposed to scripture and praying before meals only recently.
Do you guys read the Bible together?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And we didn't before. And I didn't, to be clear for the audience, I didn't for the first 18 years of my recovery. I was not part of, I was very anti-religious and I didn't want to be a part of any of that. Part of my journey has been it with scripture, and it has been the last couple of years. And my kids, particularly our oldest, really takes to it. She loves it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's got her own fellowship at church.
That's so cool. That's so cool. But so I've, at the suggestion of my church, have been trying to pray with my wife, and
Praying with your spouse is powerful.
and I'm trying to get there, and I believe that it is. It's awkward still for me. It's like it just doesn't fit quite right. But like with anything else, I believe it's a muscle that needs to be worked, and it will get more comfortable over time. And so we just kind of carve out a time. We say that this is where and when. That's how good habits are formed, when you have a time and a place that you do it. And so we're working on it, but it's definitely feels a little bit uncomfortable right now.
I'm not much farther ahead of you on that one. Nicole and I do pray together. I don't know that it's been operationalized, made part of our routine, so to speak, but we do pray together, and we have been praying together now for a year plus. So it's not that we never prayed together before, but it's been a lot more intentional in the last year or so.
Sure.
It's definitely gotten better. And it can be a little awkward. I think I'm an awkward prayer to begin with, which is odd because I'm pretty good at talking and I can just yap about all kinds of things.
Sure.
But then when it comes to like, all right, where the words come from to bring God into this situation that my wife and I are sharing? Yeah, I feel like I might just being self-conscious, but yeah, I feel like the words are awkward when they come out. I don't feel like I'm super great at it.
When I was doing my characteristics of God, and when I'm working with guys and this and that, and I always say that he's funny, and I find him funny. So sometimes I don't blasphemize or anything like that, but I'll make jokes while I'm praying when I'm doing it for the family over dinner, and it kind of makes it more lighthearted with the kids.
That's a great idea.
Like I'll focus on one of the kids and what's going on and say, God, if you've got any more time, please pay attention to Carter as well, but it kind of breaks the ice. With the family, it feels more natural than with my wife just in the bedroom.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Maybe it's because it's a bigger crowd, similar to I don't feel, it feels almost so intimate, and it's like such a sacred time. And and I know it's something that's so important for me and with my wife, and she's a follower too, and she's super spiritual. And so it's bizarre that it is so awkward. But I'm gonna just keep working at it.
Yeah, I love the ideal of muscle memory and just continuing, because that's how all things worthwhile happen. The big climactic shifts, they aren't usually singular events. They're small healthy activities that are operationalized over time. They become part of our routine.
Right.
Eventually, it just becomes normal. Like newcomers, they don't like going to meetings generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you check in with them in 5 years, they're like, I can't be there. I got a meeting to go to.
Do your kids, speaking about doing things over time, do your kids have chores, and do you lay that all out? Do you guys have set things that you expect out of your kids other than just being good kids?
We do. So we kind of wrestle with the word chore, but yes, they have responsibilities that are expectations as being part of the family, part of the household.
Okay.
We don't pay money for those. They do have opportunities to earn money. We call them gigs. They do have opportunities to earn money in other ways that are also useful.
Right.
We want to make sure they're useful. We're not just giving them money for doing something cute. And it's not that we're not generous with our children either. But yeah, we separate gigs from responsibilities. They're not the same thing. I've got responsibilities for the household that are due whether we're doing great, whether we're struggling, whether times are good, bad. I got to take the trash out.
Yeah.
Either way. If I had a good day, bad day, long day, short day, it doesn't matter.
Right.
People are sick. I'm sick. The trash still has to go out. So, we like to set the tone with chores. Most people call them, we call them responsibilities. They've got responsibilities, and we don't allow freedoms, which is another set of activities that they want to do, until responsibilities are handled. And that's every day. Also, we homeschool. So everything that's happening in their normal workday is happening in our home. So for them, responsibilities, in addition to that, they've got schoolwork that needs to be completed for the day, and then they can move on to freedoms.
How are the kids doing with the homeschooling?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. We could touch on homeschool for a minute. I was skeptical of, how I thought it was going to be very daunting. It felt very daunting at first. Are we going to, first of all, who's going to do it? Are we going to split it?
It's a real question.
I'm already busy at work.
Right.
Are we going to be good at this? Do we know to teach them the right stuff? Are our kids going to be weird? Are they not going to be socialized properly? These are the questions. These are the questions that most people have, that we had. Very, very normal apprehension around it. And I got to tell you, one of the things that shifted for us, we'd done close to a year's worth of research. We follow a guy named Matt Bodrow, who's he's not a big proponent of homeschool on its own. He's a big proponent of like taking children's education, like taking the bull by the horns with children's education, whether you're homeschooling, whether you're in private school, whether he actually has helped found many schools, including a program called Apogee. So he's done some really, really innovative stuff around education, really accelerating what kids are capable of, because they're capable of so much, and just kind of freeing up some of that
Sure.
that potential within them. So we studied him and some other people that really gave us the courage to try. So we were at a great school. It was a charter school, so it's classic liberal education, very heavy into classic literature, et cetera. Great curriculum for all intents and purposes.
And the kids are doing well.
Our oldest was doing well.
Okay.
Our middle child was performing well in as far as the metrics. When she would come home, we would sit in the line, first of all. So as long as she came home, hi, what was your day? We would sit in the line for like an hour, go through the pickup line, pick up our kids. And we had 2 girls at the same school. And our oldest, how was school? Fine. Ask our next one, how was school? And if we could get her to talk, she would scream at us.
That's scary.
Not words,
Yeah.
just screaming, sometimes tears. And we were very
This is more than once.
daily.
Wow.
And not from day one, about a month or so into it. And we would ask her, are you okay? Did someone hurt you? Did a grown-up hurt you? Did someone touch you? Are the kids and it's no. Were the kids mean to you? Are the kids nice to you? And she was little. She's in kindergarten. She's 5. We couldn't quite get to the bottom of it, and yet we weren't. And it's not like years went by. We're a month in. At 2 months, we pulled them. So another, a month of this behavior, and we go to the parent-teacher conference, first one of the year. So early, only a couple, like 60 days into the school year, and we're pulling our third grader our second grader, and our kindergartner, and we're going to the parent-teacher conference because we're curious. What do they have to say about our children? Even though we know that they've already had their last day, teachers don't know that, kids know that, we know that, and we ask about our middle child. How is she doing? And Nicole and I, we know how she's doing at home, and we're very concerned. But we don't say that. We don't spill the beans. We hold our cards close to the vest, and we say, how is she doing? Oh my gosh, she's one of our best students in class. Now, this is a child who has an overactive mind, fidgets, hops around, walks. She dances when she walks. She is a very athletic, very interested and interesting child. She is always in exploration mode. She likes to build things. She's very tactile. She is just a ball of energy. She's amazing. She's an amazing little human being. And they say, well, she's one of the best students we have. She just sits perfectly still. She follows our directions perfectly. She never talks to anyone.
So that's not what I see out. Yeah.
Oh God, it broke my heart.
Yeah.
It broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. The traditional school system, unwittingly, they weren't being mean to her intentionally. The traditional school system unwittingly had taken this beautiful child full of creativity and potential and stuffed her in a fucking jar. It's in kindergarten. Then a teacher, our older daughter's teacher comes into the room, and she goes, so I hear you guys are moving away. That was how she interpreted today was my life. So our oldest
But you guys had to have been moving, yeah.
Our oldest spilled the beans and said, we're not coming back to school.
Right.
And she said, are you guys moving? We said, no, we're not moving. They said, well, what's going on? You guys going to a different school? And we said, no, we're going to homeschool starting tomorrow. And the teacher who had just told us how perfectly our ever animated child sits motionless all day.
Right.
She says, you're going to homeschool? We say, yeah. She says, you'll never make a better decision in your life for your children. I go, that's interesting. You're a teacher in a traditional school.
You're part of the machine.
She says to us, I homeschooled all 3 of my boys and eventually they grew up and I love being an educator. And so I took a job as a teacher. I love teaching people's little ones. I love this. She said, the time I spent educating my boys is the best years of my life. And they've gone off and lived productive lives. You've met Nicole. You know Nicole. She helped build Cornerstone with Marcus and myself. She's an alpha. She's an aggressive and astute businesswoman. She is smart. She is tenacious. She asks tough questions. So what at first seemed like this big daunting thing that we don't really know what we're doing, we did what we do as entrepreneurs and we researched and then we took the step, we took the risk. And then Nicole just sunk her teeth into it. And we've had an amazing experience in the year and a half plus, that about a year and a half we've been homeschooling. Not only have my children both jumped grade levels, their reading and arithmetic abilities are exceeding their cohort that they left behind in regular school. That's one thing, but it's not all about test scores either. I can tell you what's the craziest thing. We are so much closer as a family.
I bet.
I still go to work and I don't go to work as traditional people go to work. I work from home sometimes and different things and we can travel, but I'm not home as much as Nicole is. And even with that still being true, our family unit is so much tighter than it was before. It's amazing. Homeschooling our children has been it's probably the single most important thing we've done with our children other than introducing them, to God. It's awesome. Our little guy, he goes to a pre-K. Mm-hmm. On the socialization aspect, he needs to learn to be around other children.
How do you keep the older ones in socializing activities? And
so first of all, we have a group with a couple other families. These are my wife's best friends and their significant others and their children. We call them the cousins. They're not blood related, but we actually they got on board with homeschooling too. So there are 9 children in total, and there are 5 that homeschool together with our 2. So we have like a
classroom.
We have a classroom, and they're all different grade levels. Yeah. So on one hand, we have the cousins. They're with other children. They're with other children. We also have friends that have kids. Richie's a great example. He has 3 boys who are awesome. We do play dates with them, and our kids play with them. We go to church, and our oldest is really sunk her hands into that fellowship, and we now have friends from church because of Everly's friends at church.
Right.
And there's a social circle there. So our children are with other children a lot.
Right.
A lot. And then you could almost, and I'm not trying to be brash when I say this, but you could almost flip it around, which I've heard people say when they talk about homeschool, and it's like, well, what exactly do you mean by socialization? Like introduce them to drugs and premarital sex at tender young years? Like a hard pass. I don't necessarily want to socialize them with the general population.
Sure.
And that, there's a lot of merit to that as well. In recovery, I have made a very strong intentional effort over the course of many years to construct or architect a bubble. At first, it was for me when I started caring for myself and started taking responsibility for my life, caring for myself, reparenting myself. I started to build a bubble. Who do I spend time with? Yeah, I spend time in service work, so it's not like I don't go to the hood. It's not like I'm not comfortable in the hood, but I don't live in the hood anymore.
Right.
And I don't spend all my time in the hood. And with, I spend my time carefully. I'm intentional about how I spend my time. So the bubble, it started with, I'm going to hang out with my sponsor and his friends because they know what they're doing, right? They know how to stay sober. They know how to build careers. Then it turned into like, I want to hang out with other dads because they know how to parent children effectively. I want to hang out with other dudes that have wedding rings on because they know how to navigate marriage and they know how to navigate life with a partner. Then it turns into, well, I'm also career focused. I'm also entrepreneurial. I also want to incorporate some of my bubble with people that understand those types of financial concepts and take those types of risks. And that's not everybody, right? All of a sudden, my sphere of influence, if you run an apartment in the hood and just have a job at McDonald's and just play video games and just look at porn and smoke cigarettes and do whatever's going on, like you're exposed to so much, and most of it's probably not real intentional.
Right.
That's a great way to get out of shape, to stay broke, to not shield yourself from the things that are unnecessarily dangerous, and to not expose yourself to the things that are opportunistic and have so much potential for growth. So building the bubble in early recovery, I mean, I did it even when I was alone, when I was dating. When I was dating, we just talked about with dating intentionally, I was constructing a bubble. I don't know who I want to let in here.
Right.
It's not going to be just anybody. And being hot isn't enough. Honestly, it's not. Hot's great. My wife's hot. Dated lots of hot girls. I've also dated lots of hot, crazy girls. And not to throw stones at them. It's me who's got the bubble. It's my responsibility to architect the life I want.
So your wife's not in AA, but how did you meet her?
Her mother and I sat on the board of the same nonprofit, which is in the recovery world. So we housed, fed, and clothed 175 newly sober alcoholics and drug addicts.
So her mother handed her off to you.
Essentially, yeah. Wendy's a wonderful woman, and in the recovery world, a lot of people, especially guys and gals with time, still know Wendy. They know that I married Wendy's oldest daughter and ask me about her. I bumped into I spoke at a meeting in Central Phoenix 2 days ago, and a guy I haven't seen in 17 years. We chit chat after the meeting. I'm like, dude. He's like, yeah, I'm still sober, 17 years. I'm like, dope. I am too. I'm 20. He's like, awesome. And he says something about, didn't you marry Wendy's daughter? And I said, I did. I said, and Wendy and I are still close. And he was like, tell her I said hi. I took a selfie with him and sent it to her. And she was like, I remember that guy. So yeah, we met that way because of Nicole's adjacent experience with recovery. She has a reverence for recovery and the things that are necessary. But, I've also, like you've talked about, learned how to not pull away from, but sort of recalibrate where I spend time. And it kind of ties into the bubble. Like my bubble now, it incorporates my children's bubble. Like, what do I want them exposed to? I don't know that I want them exposed to every possible fucking thing that happens in public school.
Sure.
Left, right, or indifferent. Like I'm not even political. Like I'm not sure I want them exposed to all of that. It's almost too much. There are too many things. I don't know at the end of the day if I'm comfortable leaving I'm not. Let me rephrase that. I'm not comfortable at the end of the day leaving my children in the hands of strangers for 8 hours a day and the broad spectrum of secular culture.
Right.
I'm just not. They get enough of it. We're secular enough. We're worldly enough. We're not some hyper, Christians from the 90s that are like, you can't do that. That's against the rules. We're in my mind, relatively worldly, pursuing a spiritual path, simultaneously trying to teach our children what's healthy and what things to stay away from. And I don't want them overly exposed to what you might find on 19th Avenue in Camelback.
Right.
Yeah. I just don't.
I don't think that's got to be a part of your grade school curriculum.
No, it doesn't. And I say a prayer for all the children who grow up in that neighborhood and who walk those streets and who don't have it better than that. And I'm not so blind to think that like not everybody can figure out homeschool or can afford it or can, it's tricky. It's not a easy thing to configure. It's simple in nature, much simpler than I made it out to be, but it's not easy to do. It would be basically impossible if you're a single parent.
Right.
So I'm not here to, shit on the public school system or even the private or charter school systems. We came to the place where we wanted something different than those systems could offer. And we found a real connection with our children and to their education in the homeschool environment. And we've met a lot of interesting people that homeschool. Bonkers, the types of people you'll meet that also homeschool.
Yeah, I believe it.
And they're not a bunch of weirdos,
yeah.
Which is sort of half what I thought when we started researching this. I'm like, these are a bunch of weird people? They're not. They're super dope. Many of them are entrepreneurs. Many of them. In fact, I just saw a clip of Naval Ravikant. He's a Series A investor in Twitter. No big deal. He's Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur, OG, like from like Web 2.0, early days of like social media and stuff. Him and Tim Ferriss were on a podcast. I just saw it. It was just recent. And they were going on and on about homeschool and how awesome it is. And, not having to fight with the line, with the pickup line, with the drop off line, not having to shake your kid awake at 6 a.m.,
Right.
force them to do homework after they've already done 8 hours of schoolwork, all this stuff that you don't have to. When you homeschool, it's very different. Homeschooling is like, you can compress 8 hours, what takes 8 hours in a normal traditional school setting, into 3-4 hours.
Right.
With lunch in between. And my children cook lunch, which is something they weren't doing in a more traditional school setting.
Yeah.
My wife and I are arguing over whether or not
I'm just picturing Isla just breaking into the cafeteria, just knocking out an omelet real quick.
Oh yeah. Oh, I sometimes I'll come out of my office, or I'll come home in the middle of the day and I see her, Isla, 7 years old, on a stool at the stove, and I'm like, oh gosh, okay, that's where we are. That's where we are today. She's cooking. I'm like, what are you making, honey?
Yeah.
Enough for me? Enough for your old man?
Is your youngest, is he in, you said he's in preschool. Is he do that 5 days a week?
No. Right now he goes 2, sometimes 3 days.
Okay.
It's Spanish immersion, so the adults there do not speak English with him ever. No. It's interesting when you go to like pick them up or drop them off, all the little the 3 and 4 or 5-year-olds, they all speak English to each other, and they speak Spanish to the grown-ups because the grown-ups only speak Spanish to them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so he's picked up a little Espanol, not the same way you and I did.
Right, yeah.
On the streets buying drugs.
Yeah, right. So we kind of touched on it earlier when we were talking about like how open you are about your recovery in early relationships. What would you say to somebody, and this is guy or gal, and almost probably more to gals, when they're getting into a relationship, at what point do you go into like kind of, if there's been sexual stuff that you might want to disclose, or that you wouldn't want them to find out, that not from you, right? Whether it's past relationship, anything unsavory, anything like that.
Like most disclosures, it's gonna be a little bit tricky, but I think there's an appropriate time. When Nicole and I were getting serious, we had a couple of heart-to-hearts about, hey, like, I'm in recovery for a reason.
Right.
I'm in recovery because I had a crippling drug habit. I did hard drugs. I drank handle bottles of vodka and gin. I lived on the streets. Having those conversations, if you're with a potential partner for life, I think there's an appropriate time as things get serious to do some disclosures. I think it can be done appropriately, and I certainly don't think that you need to rehash a play-by-play of all of the crazy, particularly sexual things that may have transpired in those years. But in some sense, it's appropriate to some degree. There are women, for example, and men as well, who have been involved in prostitution. At some point, if your life is truly different and you're with a potential life partner, a potential spouse, I think it's very appropriate at some point to say, you understand I have a past. And while that is not my life today, it's still a part of my history. When disclosing the trauma of your past with your new partner, I think it's super appropriate to have those disclosures. And then, not going into gritty detail is probably a great idea. I don't think secrecy on the other side of that coin is a great idea either. I think it's important to get that stuff out, eye-to-eye conversation. Hey, I have a past. This is kind of what it looked like. There was a time where I was a prostitute and I sold. I used my body transactionally so that I could support my drug habit. That's a hard thing for someone to say. Maybe equally as hard to hear, but it's the truth.
Right.
And if that's the truth in someone's relationship, I think that ought to be said, not on the first date, clearly, maybe not on the third, but if things are healthy and they're moving along, at some point before there's a permanent union, yeah, I think there's a disclosure that should be made. Obviously, not a play-by-play of every possible thing that may not have happened out there on the street. I mean, and I think that's probably the same with anyone getting into relationships of any, you get into a relationship with somebody, you don't necessarily want to know what their body count was. I
Right.
mean, maybe you do, maybe you're the jealous type and you're like, I want to know exactly. I can speak for me personally. I don't really want to know, assuming that my wife, not an alcoholic, doesn't have that type of a traumatic sexual history. Body count's pretty low. I don't even know if I know the exact number, but it's pretty low. And that's great. That's fine. I don't really want to know more than that, honestly.
Right.
And that's her old life anyway. And while she doesn't have an old life, new life the way I do, it's definitely her ancient past has nothing to do with today. She's not the person in her mid 30s, late 30s that she was when she was in her early 20s by any stretch of the imagination. We've both grown so much from that time. I'm not the same person I am at 47 that I was when I walked into AA at 26. I'm not the same person at 47 that I was at 37, happily married, having our first child.
You told me early on, and it's so true and continues to be true, that your whole life will change every 6 months of recovery for the first 5 years.
Oh yeah.
And it's something I share with guys all the time because everything seems so big right now. And it's like, man, it truly has. And I don't know if of all the great stuff that we've gotten the chance to talk about, anything that was more true than that with just such a simple statement.
And it's so hard to comprehend when you're walking into the journey how different things will get. A lot of people in recovery talk about, paint a picture of what your life can look like in a year and you will sell yourself short. Well, that's true infinitely.
Right.
I mean, my life at a year was so different from when I walked in, and it didn't look anything. I mean, my life was so different at 5 years than it was at 1 year. Unrecognizable from 1 to 5. And then from 5 to 10, my life was like a movie at 10 years. And that was 10 years, almost 11 years ago.
Right.
That's already becoming a long time since then. And the implication with that statement is that, dude, I've continued to grow and change and iterate and evolve and work towards, these long-range goals for the last decade on top of what was already a movie. It was already a crazy experience of, the life journey.
Have you shared on anything previous about your analogy for riding the waves?
No.
Would you mind kind of digging into that just a little bit? Because
absolutely,
it goes kind of hand in hand with what you were saying is over the years of like just getting better at this, right?
The wave analogy I usually draw in around step 3. Like I'm surrendering my will. What does that look like? I think trying to surrender my will to God's, whatever that might look like, is a lot like a surfer in the sea. And if I'm going out in the ocean, here's a great story. Nicole and I, our very first trip together, we went to Maui. This is back in 2009. We went to Maui. And while we're on the north shore of Maui, I think it's a great idea to rent a surfboard.
They famous for waves out there?
I mean, I don't know how famous. If there's any surfers watching, maybe you can comment on how bad of an idea this was, but I nearly died.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. Like I was lucky to get away that afternoon with my life. I struggled to get out past the first break. And then once I did, dude, it took me 30, 40 minutes to get past the first break. I couldn't do it. Some dude had to show me like, oh, there's an entry point and you can, and eventually I got past the first break. Now I'm out there. Now I'm in the deeper water. There's real waves. I'm gearing up. And what do you think happened in the first one? Donk. I tried to get up out of the water. As soon as I got up to grab a breath, donk. All of a sudden I couldn't catch my breath. Now I'm getting pummeled with waves every time because it pummels me, pushes me underwater. I swim to the surface. As soon as I get my mouth to the surface, I'm getting hit with another wave. It was terrifying. Now, if a person, that's their first experience. That's your first meeting in 12-step, right? It's your first AA meeting.
Sure.
I don't know what anybody said. This is weird. People are talking about God and shit. I don't like it.
Holding hands, chanting.
Holding hands. People seem to know each other.
Yeah.
It's culty. All right. But then you go do it again, and you learn the rhythm of the ocean. And you realize a surfer doesn't make the waves. A surfer isn't creating the environment. A surfer is observing the environment. at a very high level. They're becoming highly aware of what's happening and how the ocean, how the environment moves. And they're learning to fit themselves to that. And that takes a lot of practice and balance and trial and error and failure and getting yourself out of the water and trying it again.
Sure.
And the repetition of observation, awareness, and iterating, how do I fit myself to, it fits so well with step 3. As you get better at it, you can start to sort of like lay like boogie board on the surfboard, and you can sort of like ride the wave in a little bit. And you're like, wow, that was awesome. I was able to leverage this amazing, powerful force of nature and have fun with it. And eventually you can learn to stand. And once you learn to stand, I don't know how many months it takes, depends, I suppose, on your athletic ability and how much time you pour into this effort. But over time, you ever watch pro surfers?
Yeah, they get down.
Yeah, they shred.
Yeah.
They shred. And it's not because they've mastered the ocean. They've mastered their own minds and their own bodies. They've learned how to become disciplined and observant. So when I take that parallel of how does a surfer master the sea to how does a person who has failed at life, sequentially over and over again, how do they master life? It's similar. I'm learning to quiet my mind. I'm learning to do the hard thing because I know it's got a long-term benefit rather than the short-term, the means goals versus the ends goals. Rather than, get the $40 today, like how do I build a career? Rather than just sleep with the next hot chick I meet at a fucking AA meeting, instead, how do I date with intention and not sleep around so that I can find a wife, I can find a partner, somebody I can share my life with? That's, learning to ride the waves. There's a guy, Steve Leitz. He sends out emails with like inspirational, like 12-step stuff. He's been doing it forever. He's been sober like 35, 40 years or something. That's literally in his email signature. It just says ride the waves. And I've never actually had this conversation with Steve, but when I see his emails and it says ride the waves, in my mind, I'm certain that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You're riding the waves that, God's creating the waves. And if you're not careful, they'll kill you. If you're not careful, they'll take your life. The world is big and gnarly and scary. It's also beautiful and graceful. It's got a lot of rhythm to it.
Yeah, learn how to ride the waves.
Got to learn how to ride the waves. That's what we're here to do. In learning how to ride the waves, I can fulfill my purpose, which is to help lead men to God.
Mm-hmm.
I can help people rediscover spirituality, their purpose in life, at a greater effectiveness, at a greater efficiency, at a stronger clip if I get my shit together, if I can learn how to ride the waves. That's the beauty of this thing. I get to be a better dad when I know how to ride the waves. I get to be a better husband when I know how to ride the waves. I get to be a better employee. I get to be a better employer. I get to build greater companies that deliver more value when I learn how to ride the waves. Gosh. Not having patience and wanting the short-term fix, wanting the heroin, wanting the crack, wanting to just get black out right now, wanting to just sleep with somebody tonight, just swiping, eating the donut for breakfast. And I'm not here to say don't eat donuts. I'm not saying don't date on dating apps. But short-term thinking and short-term approaches do not equal long-term, long-range goals. If you take your $4,500 to the Johnny's used car lot, you're not coming home with a Lamborghini. You're not. You're not coming home with a Ferrari.
Yeah.
For me and most of the people that I know, that I've worked with, we want something better. Most of the things we want are long range. Fitness, getting in shape in a month. You're definitely getting in shape today. I want to lose 50 pounds of fat, and I want to look good in a bathing suit. Great. We're going to work on it. By next year, we should probably look pretty good.
Right.
Next year, I want to get sober and change my life. That's awesome. It's going to take 12 to 18 months of really hard work to lay the foundation so that you can go live a purposeful life and never go back to shooting heroin and fucking sleeping outside. It doesn't happen overnight. I want to be a millionaire. That's great. Start by generating revenue however you can today, legally and ethically, if that means taking a job at Subway, McDonald's, or what have you. But know that that's not going to get you there.
Right.
You're going to have to read. You're going to have to get mentors. Back to the bubble thing. Over time, the bubble's broad when you're brand new and all you need is any kind of resource. But as you start to go down the path, you're going to have to get a lot more discerning about what you're allowing into the bubble. That includes content, it includes information. That's why I don't listen to I don't listen to the rap that's talking about killing people and slaying hoes anymore. I can't. And I grew up on that stuff.
Well, and it's like when you talk about riding waves, and two things real quick I'd like to say is, in my experience, every time that I've humbled myself and taken a step back, taken your direction when you've asked me to do something, whether it be with a job, going into sober living when I already had my apartment, any of these things that you've asked me to do, that in the immediate, I was, pushed back and reluctant to do. But as I did it, God was already preparing the wave down the road for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I do these things, but still being intentional, right? In making my first things first and my priorities, is that wave was coming, and I was preparing myself to be able to ride on it whenever God was ready to throw it, right?
Even though you didn't know that's what you were doing.
I had no idea.
That's what's so beautiful about the observation, back to the surfer and the riding the waves. That's what's so beautiful about observing life, is knowing that so many of the things that are difficult today are preparation for something later. Now, I don't believe in determinism, meaning I don't believe that what's going to happen in your life, my life, is already written. Yeah. I believe there's a plan. I believe that God has a plan for your life, for my life, for everyone's life. We have free will. We don't have to follow that plan. There's also evil force in the universe, right? A destructive force, trying to not just indifferent, but actively working against that plan. So there's a lot of energy moving around. There's a lot of different ways everything can go. A lot of things go sideways. Children die sometimes. One of our children died. There is an almost infinite number of possibilities. But when I'm trying to fit myself to what I believe God's purpose for my life is, you're absolutely right. I'm setting myself up almost unknowingly for waves that are coming down next year, 3 years from now. They say luck is the combination of preparation and timing. Well, how fucking prepared are you, bro?
Right.
How prepared are you? Because
Right.
you can't buy real estate with $0. I mean, there are people on the internet that will argue that, and I'm not here to dispute that. But if you're not prepared, you have to be prepared to seize upon the opportunities that are coming your way. And if you're not doing the work on yourself to be a better man, the type of man that can attract a high caliber woman, she's going to walk right by you.
Right.
Right past you.
I listened to a church sermon once that talked about what kind of God would put you in a situation that you weren't prepared to be in. So like, as I'm wondering why why isn't he giving me this? Well, maybe because you're not ready for it. And why would God put you in a situation for you to fail like that?
I believe the gifts of abundance are to be stewarded. I believe myself to be a steward of my children and of my wife's heart and of our businesses and our investments. And the people, my sponsees, the people that I try to help, the people I meet in the street that I try to help. This is all stewardship. Not to get too biblical, but Matthew 25, very specific, very specific. Whether you're a Christian or not, whether you are Jewish or Islamist, whether you don't have religion, whether you're an atheist, hear the words. In Matthew 25, it's an incredible chapter here. And there's a verse in the center of it where he talks about God meeting everyone at the end of their life. You don't have to believe this is true for it to land. Meeting everyone at the end of their lifespan. And he's going to separate everybody into 2 buckets. One bucket, he's going to say, welcome. I'm trying not to cry when I say this. I was hungry and you fed me. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Welcome to the place that I've prepared for you since the beginning of time. And that's what I ask myself. When I talk about stewardship, that's what we're here to do with our gifts. We're here to help people. And I'm not here to hold anybody else accountable. I'm asking myself, am I being the best steward with my time, with this body, with my marriage, with my children, with the men that God has entrusted me to lead? Am I visiting people in prison? And that's just, hey, you can take that one literal. If you're a 12-stepper and you ain't a pen pal with somebody in prison, maybe that's worth praying about, bro. I'm just being real.
But it also could be somebody who's in prison in the streets.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, those measures, I don't use them as some sort of a thing. I don't look at it like I'm trying to earn my way into something, because God's grace has been given to me.
Right.
All I did was surrender, and I've experienced it for 20 years. I feel called to make sure that the man in prison is visited, that the stranger is welcomed, that the hungry are fed. And it's a big job. None of us are ever, it feels like we can hardly make a dent, but that's that's the task. It was done for you. It was done for me.
What's the starfish?
The starfish story. Yeah. Marcus told it the other day. There's a girl on the beach, and it's in the low tide. The water's gone way out, and there's all these starfish suffocating on the beach, and she's picking them up off the beach. She's tossing them back in the water. Some grown up, educated beyond his intelligence, walks up and says, "What you're doing is pointless. There are thousands of these. Doesn't matter. You're never going to save them all. It doesn't matter." She picks one up and looks at him in the eye and says, "It did to that one." And she throws him in the water. And that's what we're all doing. And if we all behave that way, God, what a different world we would live in.
Yeah.
What a different world we would live in. Mark, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, you have been a great friend to me and to Nicole and our 3 children. You have been a pleasure to watch, not just get sober, but like succeed and thrive in recovery and in your life. It's been an honor to walk this path with you and to help people, to watch you help people. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for being on here and asking me a bunch of questions today. It's been fantastic.
It's an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be here and to get to ask you these questions. I get your time often, and your insight and your mentorship and your generosity with everything, just taking the time to pour into me and ultimately now my family, has changed my life. And I know that you've done it for countless people. And so I just thank you and Nicole and your whole team for everything that they've done for me. And thank you for allowing me to come and sit here with you today.